And now we have requested Mr. Ruskin Bond, who is here for the next session, to launch Arifat Essin's new book. And it's a brand new book. It's called The Steed of the Jungle God. Mr. Bond and Arifat Essin, please. Can you come up on stage?
So good to be here with all of you. Thank you. You're all looking very bright and colorful, like the spring flowers that are around us. And I'm lucky today to be able to launch a new book. And the author is sitting right here beside me. And I hope there'll be many amongst you who will also grow up to write books. Well, you can write them when you're young too.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. It's an honor that you are releasing this book. It's indeed a fortunate moment for me.
It's been so wrapped up that I can't get it open even. Seed of the Jungle God. Thrilling experiences in the wild. So I'm certainly looking forward to reading it, and I hope you will too.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.
Raza E. Tayson is the author sitting here, and I hope she'll have a very long and successful writing career.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Bond. Thank you.
And it's beautifully illustrated too. So something I'm sure that you'll all enjoy.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Maybe you can have a picture.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So I'll just say 2 lines before the book before I move on. So this book, The Steed of Jungle God, is on my father's 70 plus years of experiences in the wild and the phenomena which he has come across, which can be attributed to ghosts and spirits, and his quest for rational explanations behind those phenomena. So it's a collection of those stories. Thank you very much.
Don't go. I'll feel lonely up here now, all on my own. You please join the party.
I think she will be conducting the session now.
Right.
Thank you so much. I'll
Thank
be
you.
seeing.
Thanks. Hello, Mr.
Come, well, thank you.
It's so wonderful to be here. 1 year back, I was talking to you, and now I'm back here with so many young people who are waiting to hear about who your favorite children authors were when you were a child. And would you share that, please?
Well, yeah, sure, I'd love to. And I guess all of you will have your own favorite authors, and I'm sure most of you are readers. And of course, some of your favorite authors wouldn't have been born when I was at school. So they would vary and differ a little. But perhaps a book that would be common to all of us. And the first book that came my way was this big book of nursery rhymes. And I think we all start off with nursery rhymes. And I've found that rhymes over the years, when you're growing up, help you to write better in many ways, because you learn about rhyming words, you learn about rhythm and making sentences come together in a musical way, and also nursery rhymes tell you stories. So I remember my first book of nursery, I don't know, I must have been 3 or 4 years old, and I still remember some of them. Jack Sprat could eat no fat, his wife could eat no lean, and so between the two of them, they licked the platter clean. That was one. And there was that horrid little girl. There was a little girl who had a little curl right down the middle of her forehead. And when she was good, she was very, very good. And when she was bad, she was horrid. You remember that?
I've heard that too. I'm not sure how many of these young kids have heard that nursery rhyme.
So a lot of nursery rhymes actually told stories too, and sometimes there was a story behind the rhyme which wasn't all that nice either way. So when I learnt about Jack and Jill falling and tumbling down the hill, I think it was my Uncle Ted told me, actually it was Jill came and pushed Jack over the edge of the cliff, and she pushed him so hard she fell down after him. So sometimes rhymes actually don't tell you the full story. That nursery rhyme book was a pretty fat one too, and I remember I used to press sometimes flowers in it and leaves, so it served more than one purpose. And on one occasion, a big centipede was crawling across the veranda floor, and I slammed the book down on it and finished that centipede. Well, since then I've become a nature lover, but still I don't love centipedes all that much. And it was wonderful, that book too. I think the boy next door, he would always pick a fight with me. He was bigger. And on more than one occasion, I defended myself with my book of nursery rhymes. Poked him one in the eye, banged him over the head with it too. So there's a lot of things a book can help you do actually in life. You can use it as a weapon of offense or defense. And the next time, so that was the nursery rhymes. And what was the first storybook? I think was Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, it was an old copy, and it had been well read, and the binding was loose, and the pictures were falling out. But well, Alice in Wonderland, like many great children's books, was actually a dream story. You know, at the end, the author tells you it was all a dream. When she goes down the rabbit hole and discovers Wonderland, and all these wonderful things happen. And it's a story that we enjoy when we are young, when we are boys or girls, and when we are old. I think I read it at least 3 or 4 times in my long life, and always enjoyed it. And then getting a bit older, and after my father died when I was about 9, and then I went to live with my mother and stepfather in Dehradun, up in North India. And in those days, Dehradun was surrounded by a lot of jungle and forest, and people would go shooting and hunting, which was very popular then. Of course, hunting wild animals is banned now, and so it should be, because before they all disappear. And in those days, though, people went off with their guns, bang, 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 and tried to shoot as many tigers and deer and wild boar as possible. And my mother and stepfather were very keen on hunting. And I was to be 8 or 9, and I was dragged along on this 1 week's camp out in the jungle. And the first day out, I was seated on an elephant along with various other people. And somebody, shot a spotted deer, and it was lying on the forest floor in its death agony. And the elephant got nervous and suddenly turned and started running away. And a branch from a tree caught me across my chest, and I was almost knocked off the elephant. So I was then taken next that same day back to the forest rest house and told to rest. So for 1 week, I was left alone while all the great shikaris went off trying to shoot tigers and various other creatures, not very successfully. But anyway, exploring this rest house, I've discovered an old bookshelf in one of the rooms. It was a bit dusty and the books weren't used, hadn't been used much. And there I discovered, and in 1 week I think I went through 3 or 4 books, and that's when I became a reader actually. So the first book was called Ghost Stories of an Antiquary by M.R. James. This is an adult book, but I was already reading adult books. And these were wonderful ghost stories. He's probably the best writer of ghost stories that's been around. So if you come across his stories, I'm sure you'll enjoy them. And the next was a funny book, a humorous book by P.G. Wodehouse called Love Among the Chickens. And then an Agatha Christie novel. It was called 1, 2, Buckle My Shoe. I think it was about a dentist who used to poison his patients by instead of injecting painkillers, he was injecting poison into their system. Anyway, it made me very nervous of dentists for some time after that. Then what else did I read? There were several others, and every evening the hunters and shikaris would come back. They never shot much because by then all the tigers and animals had very wisely moved on to another forest. But I had become a reader. And so when I went back to school, my boarding school up in Simla, we had quite a decent library, and I started reading the classics, Dickens and others. And by the time I became a senior, I was actually put in charge of the library. So this became my escape route. I had the keys of the library. So whenever I didn't want to do unpleasant things like extra homework, or PT. PT was a horrible thing, no? Morning PT. I'd slip off and go and hide in the library because I had the keys. What else was it I didn't like? Marathon races. I didn't believe who want to run 5 miles with no particular purpose in mind. So I'd much rather be sitting comfortably in the library reading a book. So the library was a great escape, and I read practically everything there, including Tagore's Gitanjali and Gardner and the Crescent Moon, and then all the classics. And now when I look back and some of the books I discovered them, not so long ago I decided I'd see if I still enjoyed the books that I read as a boy. And one of them was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, which was a very intense, passionate novel, which I read when I was 13 or 14 years old. And only last year I picked it up again, and I said, let's see, after 70 years, will I still enjoy it? Will I still hold my attention? And I sat up all night, as I did when I was a boy. And I read it all from beginning to end, right through till 2 or 3 in the morning. So there was a great book which hadn't lost any of its power or intensity. And I was a great reader of Dickens too as a boy. Now I find it difficult to read right through a Dickens novel, but I will still dip into one from time to time, especially Pickwick Papers or David Copperfield, because of the wonderful characters that are there. And so you can also always go back to favorite books or great books and still enjoy them. You don't have to read them just once. But before I now run out of words, I'll take a few questions from you or from the audience.
No, it's wonderful how you talk about the timelessness of some of the books, and how you can, even though you might have discovered it as a child, you can keep coming back to it, and I suppose bring back your life experience into the reading of the book, and how the book probably reads differently and when you are older and have had your own experiences. So that's a wonderful thing to take away, that the books can actually stay with you for life. And I saw a lot of children nodding at some of the names that you mentioned, which is wonderful, which is very heartening to see that all of you are also reading such books. And take back the recommendations. I mean, if Ruskin Bond is your favorite author, then the books that he liked, I'm sure you like them. So I hope you've made a note of those and just give them a try when you go back. So since there are so many of them, maybe we should have a question answer session
Sure.
soon enough so that
Yes.
we can take in.
Certainly.
We will be
Love to.
disappointing some of you. I don't think we can answer all questions.
It's nice to know there are a lot of people with questions. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So first let me check if the mics are in place. Do we have mics on two sides?
Yes, you
Yes.
can answer any. It doesn't have to do with just books that you or I have been reading, but I know some of you are interested in writing, in just your other interests and your hobbies. And if you want also to come and read out a poem or something you've written, that's great too. Only yesterday there was a small boy asking me if I read science fiction, and I said I haven't read recent writers of science fiction, but as a boy I read a lot of Jules Verne. He was one of the pioneers of science fiction, with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and From the Earth to the Moon, and then H.G. Wells, The Invisible Man, The War of the Worlds. So science fiction actually became popular around the time I was a boy, and now it has quite a big following.
Can I also request that let's choose questions where the answers are not available on Wikipedia. So these are questions that only he can answer here. Yes. So where's the mic? Yeah.
Good morning, sir and ma'am. My question: we have this story in our syllabus this year, written by you, "A Face in the Dark," so we have in the end of the story, sir, the teacher, Mr. Oliver, sir, the lamp just blows out, and we have like no clue of what happens. So, sir, we searched it on Wikipedia about the end or anything, but nothing was there.
Well, I'll give you the end now because it was censored out, you know. There is one line which should have been there, but I think the teachers or whoever recommended that story felt they didn't want Mr. Oliver dying of a heart attack. And that's what the last line said. After he sees the man with no face, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, who was a repetition of the boy, the last line went, and that's when Mr. Oliver had his heart attack. But they cut it out. I don't think they wanted your teachers to have heart attacks.
Oh my God! So this is something I haven't known for all these years.
Yes, well, and I only realized it recently when somebody else asked me that question a few days ago. Another student. So now you know what happened to Mr. Oliver.
Hello, sir.
Where is he? Okay.
I'm Ahuna. I would like to know what books still inspire you to date, and like what books you reread even today.
Well, yes, I've mentioned Wuthering Heights and Dickens. I went back to Stevenson too recently. But you must also discover new authors, and over the years you'll develop many favorites. And it was because of I was a bookworm, because as a boy I read so much and loved reading that I wanted to be a writer. So in a way, when people ask me who inspired you, what inspired you, I have always say quite truthfully, it was other writers who inspired me, because although I couldn't write just like them, but I could nevertheless try to pursue a literary career.
Excuse me, sir.
First, let's figure out where you are.
Yes.
Where are you?
Sir.
Hello, sir. I would like to know what happened to your grandfather's house. Where is it? I would like to visit it once. Just from outside. And why did you have to leave it?
Thank you for ask me that question, because I too would like to visit my grandfather's house.
Yeah, you repented that you could not go to that jackfruit tree too.
No, yes, you
Yeah.
know, that house was there for many years, although it no longer belonged to our family. But just a year back, I went for a walk down that same road, and the house had disappeared. This old bungalow, which had been my grandfather's, which had been surrounded by an orchard of trees, you know, fruit trees, and a garden in front. It just wasn't there, and instead there were flats. There were about 20 apartment buildings and flats all over the place, which is for me very sad, but it's symbolic of the fact that now our towns have grown so big that there is a shortage of space and accommodation, and old houses and bungalows are disappearing, and high-rise buildings and apartments are coming up. So there it is. Urbanization is spreading. Villages are becoming towns, towns are becoming cities, cities are becoming mega cities. So there's less and less space actually for gardens and orchards and even for fields and forests.
Sir, in Rusty Runs Away, you wrote that in Rusty Runs Away, you wrote that you ran away with your friend Daljit. How did the dacoits catch you?
Well, that was a story, and I haven't really been kidnapped or kept by dacoits. Otherwise, I may not be here today. But I did run away from school, just for a couple of days. But Daljit and I, we didn't take enough pocket money, so so we had to come home with our tails between our legs a day later. But being a story writer, I said, but in my story we will run away and successfully, and we got pretty far too before our teachers caught up with us.
Sir,
Sir, how was it like to grow up with the trees?
Oh, it's wonderful to grow up with trees, and so I was lucky that at least in my grandparents' house there were trees. There was an old banyan tree and a jackfruit tree and a peepal tree, and there were also fruit trees, lychees, guavas, trees. We can't. I don't think the human race would survive if there were no trees on this planet. And you're lucky here to have so many beautiful trees around you at Victoria Memorial, around your Maidan and other places in Kolkata. I haven't been to the botanical gardens yet, but I believe you have an old giant banyan tree, which has been there for hundreds of years. And banyan trees are always full of all kinds of creatures living in them, birds and squirrels and bats. So it's a little world in itself. And I think wouldn't like to live in a land or a country where there were no trees. You know, perhaps in a desert country, I'd go crazy.
sir,
Are you the boy in this cherry tree story?
Yes, the boy in the cherry tree story. He's actually here with me today. The little boy who helped me to grow the cherry tree 40 years ago or more. He's now he's now a father and of three, and he brought me to Kolkata and helped me up onto the stage 15 minutes ago. Rakesh, Raki in the story. He's.
Thank you.
I helped him to grow up, and now he helps me to stand up.
sir, good afternoon. I am a great fan of yours. Sir, I'm here. Sir, actually, I am my family consists of 3 people: my father, my mother, and me. both my parents are great fans of movies, like the new coming ones, let it be the Hollywood or the Bollywood. But I am a great fan of your books and book, books by any author. So like I'm a bookworm. So uh, they take me out for movies forcefully. I'm not interested. So like I had read Agatha Christie's Murder, like recently it was made into a movie. I don't remember the name. Yeah, Murder on the Orient
Orient
Express.
Express, yes.
I had read it and I had loved it. When I had gone there, I was spoiling everybody's, movie, and so I enjoyed doing that. But like a couple of weeks before, I had got nothing to watch on the TV, so I just started watching a movie, and at the end of the movie, I realized it was a book by H.G. Wells, and I felt so bad because there wouldn't be any fun for reading the book again, will there be? Like after watching the movie. So, would you like to?
No, that's an interesting question. I grew up on movies too, and I used to, unlike you, I used to enjoy going to see to the cinema as a boy. And there were many great authors and also well-known books that were were made into movies. More in those days than now, especially in the old days of black and white movies. So you had, you mentioned Agatha Christie, and I think half a dozen of her novels have been filmed over the years. Death on the Nile, Murder on the Express, and others. And the same with H.G. Wells. I saw The Invisible Man as a boy, and I read the book too. Sometimes you'll be disappointed in the movie because it can't include everything that's in the book. And very often it's a different genre altogether because it's purely visual with some dialogue. So, and whereas in a book you're going into the story in greater detail, and much more can happen in the book. So naturally the book is for a reader more satisfying. But there have been good movies made based on novels, particularly the Dickens novels, Great Expectations, and David Copperfield and Oliver Twist over the years. And also writers like Somerset Maugham and Daphne du Maurier. Their books were filmed very successfully. And I've had 2 or 3 of my stories filmed too. And in fact, I'm supposed to talk about one of them tomorrow or day after. And that was Janoon, which was based on A Flight of Pigeons, a story about the 1857 uprising. And The Blue Umbrella was a children's book of mine, which was made into a film by Vishal Bhardwaj, and that was a very charming film. And then there was Sat Khoon Maaf, which was based on a story called Susanna's 7 Husbands, which was a sort of black comedy. And so that's 3, and there were 1 or 2 also that were filmed but were so bad that they never got shown. So people only remember the films that are seen, that are successful, But sometimes some stories are filmed but they never reach the public. Either they're very poorly made, or maybe they're too good and they don't get a public.
Hello. Sir, good afternoon, sir. Sir.
Raise your hand, please, for there.
Yeah. Okay.
Sir, I've read quite a few of your books. In many of your books, you yourself are character in it. So one of the book I've read is Thick as Thieves, Tales of Friendship. So in that there's a story that a boy was lost in the fields, a baby was lost in the fields, and you with some of your friends find him. So sir, was that a real story?
Some of my stories are based on actual incidents or events, and on real people too. And whereas the boys in that story were school friends of mine, and something like that did happen. But sometimes, when you're writing a story, you have to develop it sometimes and take it a little further. So there was an element of truth in that particular story, yes. Whereas there might be others that were fictionalized to a greater extent. So people often ask me if my stories are true, and sometimes they are factual, sometimes they are a mixture of fact and fiction. You could call them faction, and sometimes they're purely imaginary. So I guess you would have to ask the author which of them was true. But all of them would have a certain element of truth in them, because when I write a story, I'm trying to convey some sort of meaning to you.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
In the story, the eyes have it. Why didn't the boy and the girl tell to each other they both were blind?
Yes. Yes. The eyes have it. You know, that story I wrote when I was 21 years old. So that goes back, to the time I began writing almost. 1955, 56. And it was published in Kolkata in the Statesman that particular year, 1955. And it sort of caught the fancy of readers, and it's been since then reprinted hundreds of times in books and collections and anthologies and even in school books. And but I have to tell you that in the very first version, it was only the girl who was blind, and not both of them. And it's only when I came to rewrite the story a year or two later, I changed the ending and had them both blind. So in that very first Statesman version, there's only one of them blind. But now in the story, when it gets reprinted and told again and again, both of them are. So, but that is perhaps my most successful or most published story, more than any other. It just keeps getting reprinted.
Sir, you read in one of your wrote in one of your books that you started reading by starting to read comics. So can you tell us more about that? In fact, we are not usually encouraged to read comics nowadays because it spoils our reading habits.
Yes, that's what we were told too. When I was at boarding school, we were not allowed to read comics. You got into trouble for reading comics, and you got caned if you read comics. But we still read them. So I don't think they did any great harm, except that they spoilt your spelling. I remember reading Popeye comics, and Popeye couldn't spell at all. But in a way, because he couldn't spell, you made the effort to spell correctly yourself. So it helped in a way. But I would read the funny comics. I wasn't too keen on the others, although, even at boarding school, we would when we were small boys, we would model ourselves on superheroes. So the one boy would be Superman and another would be Captain Marvel, and I was Bullet Man. Can you believe it? Bullets couldn't touch me. That's why I wear this. It's bulletproof. But I think if you're addicted to comics, they won't do you any good. But just occasionally reading one, no harm. Well, it didn't stop me becoming a writer or writing serious books.
Sir, you gave us the golden opportunity that you are coming to our school tomorrow.
I didn't know I was coming to your school. Punished? I've been punished? No? But which is your school?
Mahadevi Birla World Academy.
Well, if you take me there with you, I might come. Where is it? Very far from here?
Park Circus.
Park. Oh, that's very central, isn't it? Huh?
Yes,
Park
sir.
My father grew up in Calcutta, and he lived around there, Park Lane, in that area. But I think it's all changed, that part, as places do.
So, sir, I have a question. Sir, exams are always going on. So, we need to read storybooks also. So, what suggestion you have for us?
For exams? I'm the wrong person.
To balance, between reading storybooks and reading textbooks.
Well, I always prefer storybooks, but when you're at school, you have to read your textbooks. I wasn't very good at taking exams. In fact, with the result, my exam results were never very great. But I know you have to, it's a competitive world. You have to get through school, then you have to get through college, you have to go to university. You can't avoid exams, so you have to prepare for them. So do your best. I won't, I will always urge you to study hard, because one day you've got to grow up and earn a living, and you need a career, and you need a profession. And then you've got to look after your parents too one day, because they've sent you to school. So exams are a necessary evil. Not an evil, but they're necessary.
Sir, hi. I'm Tamanna from Shri Shikshayatan School, and my school is close by, so we can walk there. Also, last time I met you at JLF, you told me that we should not run away from school. We should make our teachers run away from school.
Yes.
Sir, I tried. Doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
So, sir, my question to you is, what is the greatest regret you have in your life? Because you are super successful and everyone loves you, but there is always this one regret everyone has, right?
Well, the regret I have is that, like you, I couldn't get one of my teachers to run away from school. Although I, like you, tried very hard. And in the end, I had to run away from school myself. But seriously, the one great regret in my life, it's not really let me think. I've always lived in places where somehow I've lived in houses or cottages or flats where there's no garden space, and I'd always wanted to have a garden where I could grow flowers and plants and trees, like just as my grandparents had such a garden, which I didn't see again after the age of 14 or 15. So that's something I would have liked, a garden to dig around in, because I like growing things. I do still grow things in pots and odd places, but to have a beautiful garden, that's something I would have liked.
So I had a question. I read one of your short stories, and it was titled, he said it with arsenic. So my question is that a true incident?
That's the one in which my uncle tried to poison me, isn't it?
Yes.
And didn't succeed, obviously. But that was, I wrote that for fun, that poor uncle, I didn't want him to go to jail, so I thought let it just be wishful thinking on his part.
Sir?
So I have a question.
So we also have a session, some time, we need to keep some time where Mr. Bond can also sign some of your books. So we'll just take 2 more questions.
So I have a question.
Oh my God, there are 100 hands and we have to choose 2. I'm so sorry about that, but...
I have a question.
Where are you?
Here, ma'am.
Here, left, right, I can't see you.
From here, it's
left
hard to tell.
Ma'am.
From here, we can see a whole lot of heads and faces.
Yeah, ma'am, I am here.
Here, on the edge.
Yes, sir, I'm from Silver Point, and I have a question that, did you face any trouble while becoming a writer?
Oh, yes, of course. You don't just become successful overnight. I was very keen on as a boy on becoming a writer, and I started at a young age, but there were many ups and downs, many disappointments along the way. In the early days, nobody was buying my books. So sometimes it takes a lot of perseverance, and you must be true to your art. And if you believe in yourself and in your own worth and talent, you will finally succeed. But you must be prepared for disappointments along the way. It's very rare to have an overnight success. You won't become famous overnight. It takes a lot of hard work and many years of work and dedication.
So I have a question here, sir.
The last question.
Me, sir.
Yeah.
So,
Where?
Hello. Me. Here.
Yes, he's
Here,
waving his hand up there.
Sorry, they're all waving their hands.
No, right at the end with the red T-shirt. Yes.
So,
Red
did your
T-shirt.
Masachi accompany you to the wildlife expedition?
Oh, you've read my last book, I see.
Yeah.
Huh? That's
you are
it.
Mahmood.
Yes, yes. Well, that's a true story, pretty well close, about my childhood. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed.
So please be seated. The signing will not be here. The books will be signed at the author's lounge. So you can get your book. There's a story book stall outside. As you exit on the right side, you'll find a story book stall. You can buy your books there, and then you can come to the author's lounge to get it signed. So please don't come rushing to backstage here. We are not going to be having the session here, okay? Thank you so much. Thank you all of you for coming in large numbers. And
thank you.
and thank you, Mr. Bond, for always delighting us with all your answers. Thank you so much.